Hello, everyone. This is the EA Global Summit 2020, the virtual conference connecting the EA Global practitioners. And this is Nizam from the EA Global Summit team. And we have Ian, the Sparx partner and EA DocX founder, who will be presenting on model management today. We thank everyone for joining this session. And we've been seeing some fantastic response with over 1,000 people connecting to this conference. And we have made our best efforts to make it quite seamless and have a collaboration platform for you to interact with the presenters and learn from fellow practitioners as well post this session. So this session, model management, Ian will be diving deep into how to maintain the model quality and consistency of your EA models, which I'll be passing to Ian in a moment. But just a quick note on questions and further interaction. So during the session, please feel free to connect to the Teams channel in which we have hosted a page for Ian's company, Ability Engineering. You'll be able to post all your questions and concerns or any feedback on that, and Ian will be following up with you post the session. And we'll also be picking up some of those questions and raising it at the end of this session so that he can answer them while everyone is still connected. We'll be sharing the link of the channel once again in the chat window if you haven't connected already. So that's it. I thank you once again for joining the session and welcome Ian to do this exciting presentation. This turns out to be one of the most sought after presentations. So we look forward to it. Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Nizam. You can see me, I hope, and you may be able to see my screen. Can you see my screen, Jackie? Yep, thank you. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ian Mitchell. I'm talking to you live from a very deserted office in Abergavenny, which is in southeast Wales, on a beautiful sunny afternoon. We're going to talk today about model management, although more specifically, I'm going to talk about model quality management. Model management is a massive topic, and we could be here all day talking about everything. Before we start to do that, though, I thought it's useful. Hopefully, you've got the slides in front of you. I'm not going to talk to every word of every slide. Hopefully, you've got in front of me a list of a few of my biases. We all have biases when we approach these kinds of things. Those are just a few of mine. I've been using EA for a very long time. It drives me mad, but I can't imagine using anything else. I'm a business analyst by background and by profession, so I don't really know SysML things. I don't really do Archimate terribly much. There's lots of other clever people who can do that. So this session is going to be about understanding what is in your model, understanding how you can fix it, and understanding how you can stop it from going wrong in the future. So I'm going to make a number of assumptions here. That models to be interesting contain all kinds of different stuff, probably multiple projects. I know there are some people who have one repository per project, but I think that's just crazy. So mostly your models will have lots and lots of projects in there. So there'll be some people doing data modeling, some people will be doing process modeling and architecture and requirements management. So a huge variety of different kinds of stuff all in the same model. And also the people doing the model will be at different levels. Some will be very, very advanced and very clever. Some will be just getting started. And that's particularly true if you're starting to just expand the use of Enterprise Architect. Because we all know, because we're all Enterprise Architect people, that the more people use EA, the more information goes in there. The more information in the model, the more useful the model. The more useful the model, the more people want to use it. So it's a kind of it's a virtuous circle. The problem is with that, as the standards that we use are going to change over time, how we model, and the one resource that we need the most of, which is the experts in how to do modeling, are in very short supply. And they're already working evenings and weekends to look after the model, so we can't make any more of them. Some more assumptions on the right-hand side there are to do with what are the solutions that are already out there. Well, everybody will say, well, if you want to know how to do model quality, you create an MDG. Well, yes and no. I'll be interested to see people's experience in the Teams session afterwards to know what your experience of using MDGs is. They are a brilliant solution for what they were designed to do. What MDGs are designed to do is implement modeling languages. They're not designed to implement how you do your modeling and how I do my modeling and how somebody else does theirs. That wasn't really what they were designed for. We've kind of squeezed and squidged them into doing that, but that's not really what they were built to do. They were built to implement modeling languages which are very stable, very well documented. So when the OMG produce a new modeling standard, they write it down in massive detail. So you can create a brilliant MDG and Sparx implement it almost overnight. It's a brilliant solution. But it's not the same as trying to help modelers to build better models, to coach people, which I think is what we're going to need to do if we're going to be successful at expanding our use of EA. So I think what we need is a bit more than an MDG. We need to be flexible. We need to be fast moving and be able to change how we do things quite quickly, because I don't know about yours, my experience of writing MDGs at the beginnings of projects is you then spend weeks and weeks and weeks changing the MDG every few days because you find you want to do things differently and you want to evolve things, and MDG is a bit of a blunt instrument for doing that. But we also, I think, need it to provide more help to our modelers. So not just saying, here's a quick linker, here's a set of things in a toolbox. It's more coaching them, encouraging them. And so this is where this gadget called Model Expert that I'm going to be talking about originally came from. And the stages that I'm going to take you through this afternoon are in sort of these three bits. I'm not going to do the bit in the middle. And this happened to me on one very large and two smaller projects over the space of about 2 years. So I'm going to paint this as if it happened, in one afternoon, but it took a long time. In all of these cases, they had a really good core modeling team who really knew their way around enterprise architect. They were excellent. They produced good, tight models, no extras, really, really good stuff. And in all the cases, they tried to roll it out to more people. And in doing that, if the people are just down the corridor, that's fine, assuming they're not in lockdown and you can't go around the corridor anyway. But if they're on the other side of the world, they're working for a different part of the organization, you can't say, oh, you need to come over here and we'll train you, because that's just not going to work. Certainly not going to work in the UK at the moment. So you need to get them to model in your own style, and you can give them access to the model. You can let them do their thing. When it comes back, then you have a task of, well, what on earth have you done? And in all of these three cases, that's what happened. Teams elsewhere were given enterprise architect, given the shared repository, a bit of training, off you go. And what came back was interesting. Some of it was fantastic. Most of it wasn't. Some of it was absolutely terrible. Some of it, people had completely misunderstood what we were trying to do. Some of the people were using Visio, but doing it in EA, and that was obviously fatal. So first thing we built for all three of these customers was discovering what is in the model. And the conclusion that we got to the end of that is this is something that everybody should do. Everybody should know what exactly is in their model. What's the structure of it? What types and stereotypes, connectors, diagram types, what fields in EA are you using, what tag values are you using? Everybody should know that. And sometimes we call that the meta model, which we'll try and avoid crazy terminology like that. The second thing we built for each of these clients, which we'll look at again in a moment, is finding out what the matter is and fixing it. Now, clearly, this is not something you're going to want to do all the time, because there's nothing worse than you do a bit of modeling, you send it to me, I then spend 3 days fixing it, then you send me some more stuff and I spend 3 more days fixing that. So the final stage that we're going to look at is this thing that we're calling guided modeling. So how do we stop new EA teams from making the same mistakes again? And this is about providing guidance to them exactly where they need it. So not reviewing it 3 weeks afterwards, but giving them at the exact instant they're trying to do something, go, oh, by the way, this is the right way. Remember how to do that? And stopping them from doing the wrong thing. It's kind of ironic that the thing we all love about EA is it's so flexible. You can put anything into any diagram and it's all fantastic. That's also the problem when you come and try to roll it out, is it's so flexible because people can do any old stupid thing. So those are the 3 kind of stages. There's a bit in the middle, which is where we actually capture the rules and the standards and stuff, and we put it into one of these things we call a reference meta model. But we're not going to have time to do that today. So here we'll go and have a look at what we've built for these clients in terms of examining their model. So here's a project. It's a made-up project. It's what I use for doing my training for my customers, and it's called Get Lost. It's a travel agency. If we ever all travel again, it'll be great, won't it? So let's just look at the top-down view of this project. So this is, you've got to have a dashboard in this day and age. So this is our dashboard of somebody's done some modeling, they've produced this Get Lost project, they've sent it to me, and they said, well, what do you think, Ian? And I actually get this question quite a lot. You have 5 seconds to make a decision on, well, what do you think of my model? Well, here you go, there's my 5 seconds. So what are we seeing here? Well, the top line is the elements, diagrams, connectors, and people that are involved in this package. Remember, it's just about this package, not the whole model. Gives me an idea of what's going on. We've got issues and requirements and actors and use. So there's a big variety of things in this particular model, because this is a teaching model. So it's got pretty much all of the UML models inside it, and it's got lots of connectors and things. And if we want to, we can look at the different kinds of diagrams and see how many kinds of elements they have and how many element types, starting to give me an idea of how complicated is this model. What kinds of things are going on in it? Other clues are things like the number of packages. Well, if I've got a lot of packages compared to the number of elements, so actually this is quite a tall model. It's got quite a lot of packaging inside it. It's not right or wrong, it's just starting to give me a feel of what's going on. The alternative to this, by the way, which if somebody does ever send you a model and says, what do you think, is you just wander around in the model and you open a diagram here and you open a diagram there and hope you find something interesting. This is a systematic approach now to say, this is what is in that part of the model. So connectors, people is an interesting one. I was put onto this by a colleague a few months ago in a session we had in the UK. Paul Fisher from Mosaic Island, who was doing a lot of really good work in his model, burrowing in there to find out what the people were doing. So this might be a good indication to say, well, who's doing the work in here? Well, actually, this model, it's mostly me, so I'll go and talk to myself, which probably I shouldn't do. But it gives you an idea of who are the movers and the shakers, who's doing the real work in here. So if this is a brand new model that you've never seen before, you could go and talk to some of these people. We have a word cloud in the middle, mainly because I found a word cloud widget on a website and thought I'd use it. Down at the bottom, which of the diagrams I might want to look at that have the most interesting stuff going on. So which elements appear in the most diagrams and have the most connectors. So they think, that's okay. So these are mostly people. So this model seems to be focused at the moment mostly around people, not necessarily around activities and that sort of stuff. And which diagrams are the most complicated, numbers of element types and numbers of elements, they might tell me the most. Over on this side, we've got some metrics that, again, they're not right or wrong. Bert Dinkermans this morning was talking about duplicates. This gives me an idea of, well, how many duplicates have I got in this part of the model that have the same name, the same type, and the same stereotype? Again, doesn't mean it's wrong, but if I have that a lot, that says it's just chaos inside this part of the model. So there's various ways here of going through and figuring out where all these are and resolving those issues. Similarly, empty diagrams, it's not the end of the world, but it's just messy. It's just sort of, nobody's really looking after it. The key bit, though, that's going to get me into really understanding what's happening in this part of the model is this complexity measure. And for this, we draw a meta model diagram. So we'll send Model Expert away to draw that. This code, by the way, that's doing this is the same core of code that produces quick documents in EA Docs. It's exactly the same bit of analysis. So the engine is the same. It just displays it in a different way. So EA layout gadget, oh my goodness me, I've got to zoom all the way out to see what's going on. Okay, so it's big and complicated. And I kind of knew that. I was expecting that because I've got requirements and analysis and use cases and BPMN charts and all that kind of stuff. It's a bit too big, really. Not the biggest I've seen. It's the biggest I've seen is 150 boxes. And that took a little while. That was about a minute and a half to create all that. So it's too big. I can't get my head around anything with that number of boxes. So let's just pick a bit of the model. Let's pick the business analysis bit because that's what I know about. Create a snapshot meta model. What's going on in the business analysis part of this project? So this looks like something I can understand. This, by the way, is Model Expert that you're seeing doing this. This bit of Model Expert is the free bit, and it's not a 30-day trial free, it's a free bit. So there's no excuse for not knowing this stuff. So I've got a manageable number of boxes now, which is not, I can sure to get my head around these. So let's just zoom out a little way and see what we've got. Well, first thing that's interesting is it's actually two different bits of modeling. There's all this lot, which looks like classes and state machines and states. And so that's basically classes and states. And then I've got my use cases and actors. Well, that's interesting in itself to say what's not there. There's no links between classes and all this stuff. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why they did that. Obviously, this is a demo model just to show you what's going on. So let's zoom in a bit more. And let's help the EA layout tool to do some stuff here. So this is a meta model, maybe not in the way that you've seen it before, but I think it's designed really for clarity, not for 100% is it UML beautifulness. So what can we see in here? Well, let's focus on this bit in the middle. What have we got for these use cases? So there's fairly small numbers of them. There's only 11. And interestingly, so the alias field has been used nearly all the time, probably 10 out of 11, I suspect. They've all got names, that's good. Not many of them have got notes, and hardly any of them have got scenarios. There's an average of 1 scenario per 4 use cases. So this use case model is not very well populated. And we can tell that for any of the items that we look at. What are the standard attributes and what are the tag values that we use? So we can look at a different one down here, say for the actors, only 4 actors. Oh, somebody's invented a tag value called importance. I think there's obviously just 1 actor, so only 25% of the actors have an importance. And there's notes on some of them, but not on others. So somebody's doing some weird stuff here, just inventing their own tag values, but never mind. And you see the same thing for all the different types that are in here. Starts to get more interesting when we look at the different connections that exist. So thick lines, by the way, just mean there's more of them. So in this one, mostly we've got include relationships between use cases. We approve of that as use case writers. Somebody's done one that's called information flow, which is an arrow. So this might be somebody who's in the Visio school of thought that says, I have a box, I have another box, and I have an arrow in between them, and it doesn't matter what the arrow is. Well, these are the people we need to come alongside and help, because that doesn't make for good models. By the way, the first time we threw this particular bit of Model Expert against a real model, the answer for this particular bit for use cases and actors came out with something like 300 use cases and 9 different ways in which a use case can relate to another use case. I actually didn't know there were 9 possible connectors that would work between use cases, but apparently there are. And this was the first point at which the chief architect, who I was sat next to, just had a complete meltdown and went, what is everybody doing? On my beautiful model, they're polluting it with nonsense. But we said, okay, let's go and find out more about it. The problem, I guess, if you were to do this just using SQL, which I don't know, maybe you could, if you were as clever as Kelt, then maybe you could make this work with SQL, is, well, where do you go now? So I've got this information flow connector that somebody's used between 2 use cases. EA Model Expert will help us to go find out where it is. Oh, lots of help keep coming up all the time. So it draws me a little diagram that says this is the place where that use case is related to that use case with a flow. And by the miracle of EA, of course, we can just delete that and put the right connector in, and it'll change everywhere in the model. And we kind of forget that about EA sometimes, don't we? That you can do stuff like that. You can put up a temporary diagram, make a change, it permeates throughout the whole system, and the problem is fixed. So easy to do. Similarly, if you want to look at all the instances of a particular type or a stereotype, you do the same thing. Specialize, Model Expert, show the occurrences. And now, here are all the, I don't know why these actors, they're like child actors, aren't they? They're very, very small. Don't quite know why. you could now use standard EA functions of saying, view it in the, where's it gone? Switch view to the specification view, and yes, thank you very much, yes. And I can edit it in I can edit it in Excel, I can do all the normal EA stuff, but that's my list of that particular type. So get rid of all that lot. And similarly, more stuff that I think is a bit weird in this is, well, I seem to have a system actor, which is what I was expecting, but I have a system, not a system actor. So I probably want to open that and go and find out why that's got a funny MDG and that hasn't. And so there's some kind of weird stuff going on in here, even though it's a little tiny model. Clearly, I've built this to illustrate a point. So we can find out a lot just from looking at this snapshot meta model. We can get an idea of the types, the stereotypes, which EA fields you're using, which tag values you're using, and which connector types. So I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I haven't forgotten anything, and Jackie's going to shout at me afterwards for not talking about the right stuff. I think we'll probably do for looking at meta models with that. So going back to my script, which I like to try and refer to occasionally. So that's the kind of discovering what's in your model bit. And then we've gone and done some finding and fixing. So then there's more that we now need to do, because the last thing I want to do is say, you give me a piece of modeling, or your team has finished doing what they have to do, they've produced all their documentation, you send me the modeling that you've done, I'm going to put it in the shared repository area, but I have to spend all this time analyzing it and fixing it. That's the absolute last thing we want to do. What we actually want to do is to engineer some better knowledge into the heads of the people doing that modeling, so they get better as time goes on. And this is where we move into the kind of the final stage of the three, the idea of guided modeling. So we've got to put that knowledge somewhere. Now, traditionally, you would put that into an MDG, and the MDG would say, these are the element types and stereotypes you can have, the connectors. You could even define some tag values. You couldn't really define any kind of help particularly. You couldn't put lots of links in there to other things. But that's typically what we do. All of the three projects I was talking about earlier on, all three of them had really good SharePoint, I think they were, SharePoint sites, which had, hey, look, here's some examples of how to do this modeling. Here's an example of this diagram. Here's what this idea means. Here's what this connector means. So they had loads and loads of content. It just never seemed to intersect with the users. The modelers were doing their modeling, and they never seemed to see the bits they needed to see. So what we've done with Model Expert is we've built the ideas that are in the heads of the people who know how to model, and we've put that knowledge into what we're calling a reference model. It's actually a reference meta model rather than a reference model, but we'll call it a reference model to keep it simple. Excuse me. So what we're going to do is take the knowledge from these people and put it into a reference model. Now, the main thing with a reference meta model, it's got various aspects. The first thing is it's a class diagram in EA. That's all. There's no magic in there. There's no secret formula and clever XML files and dark magic. It's just a class diagram, because really a meta model to me in UML terms is pretty much a class diagram. So we store it as a class diagram. So if I'll just divert back to EA for a minute and I'll show you, I can find it, the class diagram, which is this one here. So core BPMN is the one we're going to use in a minute. Reference models, core BPMN, reference model summary. So that is what's going to be driving all the stuff we're about to do. Okay, it's got a lot of arrows on it, but it defines, in this case, a subset of BPMN. Now, those of you who've used BPMN know it is ferociously complicated. There are, I think I worked it out once, 120 different kinds of event. Nobody in their right mind lets users use 120 kinds of event, so you're going to be using a subset. So this is a subset, I know, but it's a regular EA class diagram. What that means is, well, several things. First is I can import it and export it because it's just a class diagram. Make it into an XMI, I can send it to you, you can send it to me. Also, I can have as many of these in my system as I want. I don't just need to have one. So If, let's say, I'm using BPMN for process modeling, I can have a basic version of it that's pretty simple, just has basic flowcharts in it. I can also have an advanced version of it for people who've really done the training and understood it, and they can then go and have a wider range of ideas, because I'm pretty confident that they're going to do the right thing. And I might have a SysML one in there, and a requirements model, reference model, and a user stories model, all kinds of, it's similar to what you'd have with an MDG, except I can have multiple versions of the same thing. Now with MDGs, you can do that, but it starts to get very messy if I have different versions of the same MDG. These are just, they're live in your model, and I can have as many of them as I like. And that, to me, is a key difference. What that means is I can give a bunch of users a basic BPMN model, or a basic SysML model, or a basic requirements model, whilst other people in the same model are working on a different one, and maybe that's moving around a bit more, that's evolving, that's changing. So this is going to help me to evolve my model in a controlled way, rather than having to say that's the MDG and it's fixed until I have a new one. So let's look at what the it's a single slide on how you actually create one of these reference models. Well, I have to say, loath to criticize the MDG mechanism, but for me the bit I hate the most is when it says, right, create an MDG, and you use that little wizard thing and it gives you the, was it the animal or something, which I very rarely do animal modeling, and then basically it's an empty sheet of paper, and I have to go, well, okay, well, what stereotypes and types have I got in my model, and how are they linked? And I have to basically reinvent everything and re-describe everything. What Model Expert does is it says, right, we'll take the best bit of modeling you've got, take a bit of BPMN modeling or SysML or Archimate or anything you like, and we'll use that to create a draft reference model. So basically we'll do what we just did with the analyzer. We'll take a model, we'll produce a meta model and say, right, let's make that a reference model, and then I can use that to add any extra bits that I need, which is about 50 times faster, particularly on a complex reference model, than having to describe it all from scratch. I then save it. Well, we'll see in a moment how you say to somebody, I want to use that reference model. I want that one there, not the other one over here. And then you can monitor how people are doing with it. So it's I hope a fairly simple way of producing these reference models, because I do find the MDG one pretty hard. So let's have a look back in EA now at what the experience would be for a modeler doing some of this stuff. So let's get rid of some of the rubbish. Okay, so then we've got a demo. Where's my, here we go. Here's my new projects bit. So that was get lost. This is my new one, project A. Here's some processes. I want the users to model this using my core BPMN reference model. So this is me now as the model manager. So I say specialized model expert. I want to manage that package, and I want to manage it with this reference model. So you notice how many reference models I've got in here. I've got loads, but I want to use that one. So that's it. I've just done my setup. So if it was a shared model, I'd make sure that they have read-write access to that, and they don't have read-write access anywhere else. Off they go. Right. Change of hat. Here's me coming back as a modeler. So I say specialize. Well, I don't know. I'll just add a diagram, and I'm going to add. Oh, I don't know. BPMN choreography. That looks interesting. I'll try one of those. See what happens. Oh, okay. This is a managed package now. So Model Expert is in charge of everything that goes on. So it says, well, you've only got two kinds of diagram you can put in there. It's a basic process diagram or a process context diagram. And in fact, I can see lots of help in here. So that will take me off to a website where I can go and see some, yeah, okay, I get the idea, it's a website. So that could be my intranet site, by the way, that would explain the diagram. So I'm going to use a basic process diagram. So more help's coming up. So these diagrams have the basics of the process yard, and it can contain these things. So thank you very much. I could show an example diagram. Okay, I remember that. I remember that idea of a process diagram. Okay, so yeah, let's go. Let's get started. Yeah, I know. So here's my diagram, and the person who's produced the reference model has also produced me a toolbox. This is a very cut down version of the toolbox. It is all configurable via a user interface. There's no XML to write or anything clever like that. So we'll start and do some modeling. I'm gonna have to be pretty quick here, I think. So I'll do a start event here, and that seems okay. Yep, so I'll do an activity, that's fine. Oh, now then, I know with an MDG you can reduce this list, but I don't know, business rule maybe? Is that the right? Oh, right. The reference model has said when you define a core BPMN reference model activity, we only want to know 4 things. We want to know its name, my activity, and looks like that's wrong. So manual or abstract, that's the only 2 I can have. Manual, and it needs this time to complete, obviously 42, and a cost to run. Well, that looks like it's optional. So we're getting right away from the big BPMN, big UML EA properties list, which is just very intimidating. If you've ever taught EA to people, they go, "Oh crikey, that's a lot of effort." So that's my activity, and we can carry on and start doing our modeling. And whilst we're doing the right thing, it won't interrupt me. If I start doing the wrong thing, so I know, data store, my store, that's all good. And then I can link that to that. Oh, heck. Dependency trace information. I'll just guess trace. Okay. Again, the reference model has said no, between an activity and a data store, you can't have an abstraction trace. You can either have that or this. Notice here, by the way, there's a keep option. Any reference model, you can use it in hard or soft mode. Hard says you can't break the rules, so you wouldn't get a keep button. This is in soft mode that says, well, we've decided that we'll let you break the rules if you want. So in this case, I won't. And off we go, and I can start doing my modeling. If you get to the end of doing your model, there's then a way of saying, check it. Now, if it's a proper model that's been built using all these guided modeling techniques, it should be right. But let's say we've got a model here that's probably not right. It's been built outside of Model Expert. So let's see what happens when I want to check this against a reference model. So I want to check the process. I want to check it against my core BPMN model. So let's go. And I'm going to be looking at a whole bunch of stuff here. I'm going to be looking at all the fields, all the tagged values that are present. And remember, in BPMN, each activity can have 30 or 40 tagged values. I'm also going to run a whole load of custom scripts against each thing. Now, that's where you can put in any kind of crazy rule you feel like. It could be naming standards, it could be local ways of doing things. So there's a lot of checking that we're doing at this point to validate a diagram. And what I get is a copy of that diagram. So let's get this out of the way. I obviously haven't written on the real diagram. I've just annotated the diagram. So it's things like, that looked right on the diagram, but obviously it wasn't. It's a sequence flow, not a control flow. Okay, so that's an error. This one here is just, oh, I didn't put a tagged value in there that I needed. Here again, the relationship is wrong. This one here, I know you can't tell from looking at it, but this is a custom bit of script that says, I don't really like the idea of in BPMN an activity having 2 arrows coming out. It really just should have 1. And then you do 2 arrows from a gateway. It's a bit of a BPMN geeky thing, but that's fine. There's also a numeric measure of the quality. Now, this is something that was needed by the first client to do this. They wanted a number that said, if your total score was less than 5, it's about right. So it's good enough. And you may say, do we bother with the scoring? So that's then how you can guide a modeler through a tremendous amount of help. So they couldn't choose the wrong diagram type. They got help on the diagram itself. They got an example to show. They got a template that showed them, here's some stuff you need to fill in for the diagram. They got to check the diagram when they were finished. And when they did check it, they're allowed to put in hyperlinks in here that again could take them all the way to your SharePoint site to go, hey, you put the wrong relationship in here. Here's some help on how to do that. So all the time we're channeling help exactly to where the modeler needs it, not send them on a course and then do the modeling 3 weeks later. but exactly at the moment when they need it. And if it's going great, don't get in the way. Don't bother them. So that's the idea of checking a diagram using Model Expert. I'm just going to consult my little notey bits in here again. The final bit we'll look at then is, because not all information in EA is done through diagrams, a lot of it's done in relationship matrices. So we can apply exactly the same rules, in fact, identical rules, to things in a relationship matrix. Now, Bert Dinkermans in his session this morning showed the EA relationship matrix with some clever overlays, which I was pretty impressed with, I have to say. I have to say I lost patience with the EA relationship matrix many years ago because it just doesn't do all the things I want to do. So this is now the Model Expert version of the relationship matrix. So first of all, it's more colorful, isn't it? It's just a little bit more informative. So this is a RACI matrix: responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. I looked at Jackie and I got it right this time. So there you go. So there's the RACI idea, and I can see from here what relationships there are. And if I'm very sharp-eyed, I might be able to spot that that relationship is in the wrong direction. Now, in a little tiny model like this, that's not so bad. In a bigger model, it's harder. A few extra things, by the way, in here is we're a lot more flexible on how many columns you can have here, how many extra rows you can have here. We do filtering and sorting and all those other great things that you'd expect to see. That some of them are in EA and some of them not yet. I'm sure they will be. So we could validate this using a reference model. Probably more informative to look at a bigger one, because a bigger one is going to be much harder. So quickly, can you spot the errors on there? Well, not really. Some of the actors and some of the requirements are related in the right way and maybe not. So again, we can apply a reference model to that and say, let's show me this is actually the actors and requirements ratio. And we'll go away and examine each one. It's just those two that are wrong. So we can apply the rules that are in this reference meta model. We can apply those rules, whether it's a relationship matrix or a diagram, whether we're dragging and dropping things into diagrams, making connectors. We apply the rules exactly where the user needs it, not 3 weeks time, right now. And we lead them on to say, this is a better way of doing your modeling. So well, let me see what else I've forgotten to talk about. So I think I'm probably near the end of my 45 minutes. So what have we just seen? So we've seen a thing called Model Expert. Now, the discovery part is free. Everybody should go and download it and apply it to your model. Do it package by package, by the way. If you apply Model Expert to your whole model, you better have a long coffee break because it's going to take a while because it's doing a lot of work. So pick a project by project and see what's going on. And draw that reference, meta model and understand who's using which fields and connections and stereotypes. If you want to, then you can jump off and find and fix what the problems are. But bear in mind, if you're doing it now, you might have to do it again and again and again. If you want to go to the final stage and move to this idea of guided modeling, then Model Expert will help you work this one through. You can take the rules from your best possible bit of modeling, put them into a reference model, hook that up to your SharePoint sites to give them help, template diagrams, example diagrams, and really focus down on helping those users to produce the best possible models. Because that's what it's all about. If we can do that, then we can evolve their knowledge, we can move their knowledge forward and produce better and better and more useful models. And that really, I think, is what it's all about. So I think that's all I'm going to say today. If there are some questions coming in, I think I have about 5 more minutes or so. Are there any questions? I'm looking at Jackie to see if there's any questions. Nobody's asking any questions. Brilliant. Well, that must have been all completely perfect and correct. So I don't know.
Thank you, Ian. There are quite a few comments and feedback in the Teams platform. Okay.
Do you want to ask me a few of the questions now, Nizam, and I'll try and answer them now while we're here?
So one of the questions I think you answered pretty much, like you mentioned about a part of it being free, so they want to know which part of it, or what's that functionality that's available for download without a cost?
The dashboard is free, and the thing that draws you a meta model, that the brown colored meta model, that's free. Some of the fixing actions beyond it are free and some of them are not. And I can't actually remember which is which. So you'd have to test it out. But there's still a 30-day trial anyway, so we'll find out. So,
yeah, so I think that was the main question. And as a general question, how does it fit with the MDG that like a custom MDG someone would have defined?
Good, yeah, it's a good question. No, you can see in the example I had there was a BPMN based one. So I was pulling information from the MDG for BPMN. So if you already have a custom MDG, we can still pull information out of that, because when you're building a reference model, you start with some modeling you've already done. I don't care how you've modeled it. You could put BPMN and SysML and Archimate and everything in there. And typically that's what Model Expert is designed for, is hybrid models. So it doesn't matter how many different MDGs you've used to create your model, Model Expert will analyze that and tell you, and yet let you use that as your reference model. So you can have as many MDGs as you like already in there. Hopefully you might not need to write too many more.
Yeah, it looks like this is a more dynamic way to manage it.
I think so, yeah. It's also actually a plug here for Prolaborate, because bear in mind it's Nizam and his team who've put all this together. If you're going to look at all this EA information in Prolaborate, then this kind of thing is extremely useful, because Prolaborate is an entirely fabulous way of looking at your data or getting new people to look at your EA models. You want to make sure that what they're looking at is right. So if you can apply this kind of technique before they look at it in Prolaborate, then your Prolaborate particularly the traceability type diagrams, are going to look even more fabulous. And if you haven't looked at Prolaborate, you should. Plug for Nizam there.
Thank you, Ian. That was kind. Yeah, but it all, yeah, but a really well-structured model is imperative for any kind of analysis. Even like for a basic query and to find some results, I think we need a really good structured model. And it looks like it's one of the sessions that has garnered the most registrations and most attendance as well so far. So I guess it's a very useful topic. Thank you very much. I just would like to add a note to the participants that Ian will be available in the Teams channel to discuss further if you have any questions or if you want to ask him more about the things that he explained. And he has also shared materials, PDFs regarding this and all his other sessions as well. So you can find them all in the Teams channel. So from the EA Global Summit team, we thank you very much for attending this session, and we thank you, Ian and Jackie, for taking all the efforts to present it amidst the lockdown. We know the kind of efforts you have put in to make it really good. So thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you, Nizam.